Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you know, we've been waiting patiently for any news related to the release of Return to Monkey Island, and today we finally get a few nuggets of info. We're going to check out a new article by venturebeat.com. They managed to sit down with Ron and Dave and ask some pressing questions. I think some of the answers are quite revealing, so let's get into it. So let's take a look at the interview and see what they had to say. GameBeat. Is it relatively easy to jump back into the franchise? Did you replay the older games before working on Return to Monkey Island? Gilbert. I played Monkey Island 1 and Monkey Island 2 as we started to look at the new design. Looking at the old game can be frustrating because there's so many little things that I wish I could change. Adventure game design was a lot more forgiving back then. Beating your head against obscure puzzle was acceptable. Not anymore. It's easier to return to something of your own than it is to start working on something originally created by someone else, but I definitely still needed to do the research to get my brain in the right place. By coincidence, I was already playing through the early Monkey Island games with my son, who was 5 at the time, and finished all the humongous titles, so we just kept on doing that with a little more focus from Dad, and then during production, I continued to revisit them. Often, because I was about to write dialogue for a returning character, I wanted to remember the particular tone and cadence. GameBeat. There are a lot of recurring elements that fans expect to see in a new Monkey Island. Characters like Stan, locations like Monkey Island. Is it a fun challenge or a burden to have to work with these expectations? Gilbert. Both. We revisited some locations and characters, but you have to be careful that it's more than just a trip down nostalgia lane. The game is not a remake or remaster, it's a whole new game. We revisited locations and characters when it was important to our story. Grossman. Yes, it's a nice head start to have a character who's already been developed a bit, which can help guide your decisions about what they should do and say, but it also creates limitations. Someone written in support of a particular theme 30 years ago might not have much to say about whatever's going on in your current game. If I tried to list my favourite characters from Return to Monkey Island, in terms of both the end result and the joy I had working with them, it's a mix of new ones and returning ones. GameBeat. What are some of the starkest differences between working on a new Monkey Island today compared to the development of the original? Gilbert. For me, one of the big things is looking out for a modern and more casual audience while making fans happy. It's a tightrope to walk. There's also the element of nostalgia. Monkey Island had 35 years to build it into something that it wasn't back then. Back then it was just a game we made. It's more than that now. We were careful to honour that, but also not be afraid to move it forward. We were also young and naive. Everything was bright and shiny. Grossman. We've developed this whole game during a global pandemic. That's certainly been significant. Ron and I had one face-to-face meeting in January 2020. It's all been remote since then, with the team spread all over the various hunks of geography and time zones. In 1989, it was like we were a bunch of kids at summer camp spending all our time together. In 2022, communication is something we have to focus on and put work into. We even scheduled time to hang out by the water cooler with co-workers, because it's surprise, surprise, important to be able to relate to each other as people if you're going to make stuff together. On the other hand, the team is generally older and more experienced now and waste less time playing Tempest and Millipede. Gilbert. Marble Madness for me. I almost got fired over that game. GameBeat. What were your influences on Secret of Monkey Island's writing? It was self-referential and satirical at the time, when that felt rare for a video game. Grossman. We reference things a lot, not meaning like aping a particular style, but more like romping through a meadow and gleefully pointing out all the other media that we ourselves had grown up with. Being at Lucasfilm, there are nods to Star Wars and Indiana Jones all over the place, as well as to people and things around the office. You can also spot us leaning on TV shows and movies, used car commercials, and so on. In terms of style, I'd always been a fan of PG, Woodhouse, Douglas Adams, Lewis Carroll. There's probably some influence there, but then the rest of the team had their own backgrounds, and I think we all influenced each other to a large degree. Gilbert. I've always been a fan of parody. For me, Monkey Island was about making fun of stuff. GameBeat. Does the advent of the internet and easy access to guides change the way you develop puzzles? Grossman. Mainly it motivates us to embed a hint guide in the game itself, so when players do decide they want a hint, they don't have to risk the muscle strain that could be caused by taking their smartphone out of their pocket. Gilbert. I try to ignore that. If people want a walkthrough or spoilers, there's no way to prevent it, so I pretend it's not there. As Dave says, the hint guide is the main place to combat that. I feel that if a player leaves the game to look something up, we've lost. Giving them a built-in hint system helps, they stay in the game. GameBeat. Are there any puzzles from the original games that you regret making too difficult or too easy? Gilbert. 2 words, monkey wrench. Grossman. The monkey wrench puzzle from LeChuck's Revenge is notoriously unsolvable and was not a good design on several levels. Even if you are an English speaker from a location where the tool in question is commonly called a monkey wrench, and you realise that's what you need, you still have to make an astonishing predictive leap about how your actions will create that tool. Nothing in the game sets any of it up adequately. I use it to this day as my go-to example of what not to do with a puzzle design, and it has influenced my thinking ever since. The player has to be able to somehow visualise what to do, and if they don't give up and look at a hint, I want their response to be, "Ah, that makes sense. I should have thought of that," rather than, "How on earth was I ever supposed to think of that, you ridiculous, unfair clowns." Conversely, I can't think of anything I regret making too easy. The consequences are much less severe for that. It doesn't bring the game to a grinding halt. At worst, it's just not very interesting. And you forget about that as soon as you stop thinking about the next puzzle after it. GameBeat. Do the puzzles exist to service the story, or does the story exist to service the puzzles? I've always looked at it as a puzzle serves as a story. Story comes first, and then puzzles are layered in. Grossman. With an adventure game, it can be a little hard to separate story from puzzles in those terms. We begin by thinking about things like theme, tone, and when we start breaking down the story, we do it in terms of player character goals and actions to reach those goals. Those goals and actions are the puzzles, and they provide the mechanisms by which the player drives the story. In that sense, you could say that the puzzles are serving the story, but they aren't separate from the story by any means. They're a structural element, like plot, and the story is built with them in mind from the beginning. It's a story that you do, rather than one you see and hear. It would be a very different story if it weren't, and that is one of the things that makes adaptations from other media challenging. GameBeat. Do you feel obligated to tie up loose ends or connect threads from previous games? Or are you more interested in creating something new that can stand on its own? Gilbert. I feel no desire to tie up loose ends unless it serves a new story. It can be more fun to have them dangling out there. Let someone else tie them up in a future game. Why should we have all the fun? Grossman. A good page-turner novel is constantly tying up loose ends and creating new ones, like the tension and release in a musical score. There's a curiosity dynamic at work that makes them very satisfying. I don't feel any particular obligation to follow that, but it's certainly something I think about. GameBeat. Monkey Island was inspired by Pirates of the Caribbean. Now Disney is directly involved with the franchise. Does that open up any interesting possibilities? Are you able to maintain creative freedom? Gilbert. Monkey Island was inspired by the Pirates of the Caribbean ride of my youth. It was heavily inspired by the book on Stranger Tides. They are both inspirations, but very much different things. Grossman. If anyone is planning on redesigning the theme park ride, they haven't told me about it, but I think I'd be delighted to see it. So there we go. We have some references to Return to Monkey Island and maybe some of the reasons behind it, but still nothing too juicy there. Still waiting to hear more about the game, maybe some newer screenshots or actual gameplay, which I'm looking forward to. But everything I'm hearing from Ron and Dave, it sounds like they're really putting a lot of thought into how they're going to present this game, how they're going to do the puzzles, and even the story, because that's a very important part. So yeah, I'm sure there's been talk to death about the Pirates of the Caribbean, but I think that's his own thing now. And even if it was, I think Pirates of the Caribbean has been referenced quite a lot now with Monkey Island, but as Ron says, it started with the ride, and then Monkey Island, and then Pirates of the Caribbean has become its own thing, its own franchise. I'm sure there's some throwbacks to Monkey Island, but nothing more than that. So thanks guys, just a simple video today, just talking through the article, but stay tuned, more to come, and looking forward to a release of Return to Monkey Island. And please help a growing channel. If you want to like, subscribe, share, it helps me to get my videos out there to you. Thanks for staying, and see you next time.